Looks like we're good to go.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, October the 30th. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30, and we will begin, as we always do, with playing the national anthem. All right, I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. And we encourage residents to review the call to action information, which can be found on the links on our website. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Item number 2 on the agenda, which is a resolution from our DEI committee looking for council approval with respect to an updated mission, vision, and mandate. The actual resolution was contained in the agenda, but the proposed changes were not. So rather than sort of rush that through tonight when council hasn't had a chance to actually review what the committee's proposing, we're going to defer that item to our November 13th meeting. That's still ahead of the next DEI committee, so it won't be slowing the committee down at all. And then we'll just make sure that those draft documents are actually in our agenda package so that we can review them before the meeting. Secondarily, and I'll mention this again at the end, but we are going to have a special budget meeting for next Monday, November the 6th. I think probably 6:30, just the same regular time. And that'll be used as our actual budget working meeting, which we've done for the past few years at least. So tonight's meeting, the treasurer will give an overview, give a presentation of staff's draft budget. If there are general questions, by all means, feel free to ask them, but anything specific changes or additions or subtractions to the draft, I've just asked you to hold those until next Monday, and then we can actually get into more specific line by line discussion if necessary. Okay, so on to disclosures of interest. If any member has any pecuniary interest tonight, you can declare those now or as the item arises on the agenda. Don't see any now, so we'll move on to the minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes from our October 16th regular council meeting, as well as our committee of adjustment meeting of the same night? Moved by Councillor Guichardi, seconded by Councillor Sample. Any discussion on either set of those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Were there any questions submitted, Jennifer, for tonight, for question period?
No, sir, no questions.
Okay. All right, so we have 2 proclamations tonight. The first is a proclamation and a flag raising request, and that is for the Wrapped in Courage campaign. Whereas violence continues to be the greatest gender inequality rights for women, girls, and gender diverse individuals, and whereas November is Women Abuse Prevention Month, and whereas November 15th is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and whereas femicide rates are on the rise in Ontario, with over 46 femicides in Ontario since November 26th, 2022, and whereas our community is committed to ending femicide in all forms of gender-based violence, and whereas Indigenous, Black, South Asian, and Southeast Asian women and girls continue to experience high rates of violence, including femicide, and were overrepresented within the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses between 2021 and 2022 annual femicide list. And whereas last year in Ontario, on average, every 7 days, a woman or child lost their lives due to femicide. And whereas this month and throughout the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we acknowledge our community's support of the Wrapped in Courage campaign and commitment to ending gender-based violence. And whereas there is an urgent need for greater investment and action to end gender-based violence in our community and throughout Ontario, and whereas a Wrapped in Courage campaign flag will be raised during Women Abuse Prevention Month in recognition that the courage of a woman alone is not enough, and it takes an entire community to end gender-based violence. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, do hereby proclaim November 25th, 2023 as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and urge all citizens to recognize this day by taking action to support survivors of gender-based violence and becoming part of Ontario-wide efforts to end gender-based violence. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the flag raising request for the Wrapped in Courage flag for Monday, November the 20th at 3 p.m. It's moved by Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. Second proclamation is for Veterans Week, which is November 4th to 11th. Whereas Veterans Week is a time to honor Canadian veterans and soldiers made up of the young and old who share a common goal of keeping our country strong, proud, and free. And whereas Canada has a long history of providing military assistance in order to secure peace around the world, and whereas peace and freedom are not just words, but values and beliefs worthy of sacrifice yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And whereas Canadian sacrifice and valor will be remembered forever as a rich legacy of peace, freedom, and identity. Now, therefore, to show support for our veterans and their families, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of Council, do hereby proclaim November the 4th to 11th, 2023 as Veterans Week in the town of Shelburne. And I would also entertain a motion to approve a poppy flag to be raised on Friday, November the 3rd. It's moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Guichardi. All in favor? That's carried.
Do we have a time? Do we have a time on that flag raising there? Do we know?
Sorry. I've reached out to the Legion to see if they would like to hold a ceremony, and I have not heard back from them as of yet.
Okay. If you just maybe let us know. Okay. I won't be in town that day, so unfortunately I won't be able to make it. So if we could have a decent showing from council, that would be good. Okay, so that takes us to our presentation of the draft 2024 budget. So I will turn it over to Carrie, and just as I'd mentioned before, I think we'll let Carrie get through her presentation. If there are questions of a general nature, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to answer those tonight, but anything more specific, we'll kind of wait for our working budget meeting next week. So other than that, I think, Carrie, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you. And I will just try to remember how to share my screen. Okay, everyone can see that?
Yep.
So good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Tonight we are pleased to present to you the draft 2024 budget. As you can see, the we've tagged the presentation as the Year of the Park, which is depicted throughout the slide deck. And I can't take credit for any of those photos. They were all taken by other members of staff. And it's also prevalent to the number of recreation projects that have been identified through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we thought it fitting to include as many pictures of the town parks as we could in our presentation. And we've also included a table of contents just for ease of reference later on if anybody has any questions about a specific slide. Okay, just 1 second here. I have to get rid of my view here. There we go. The road of where I need to click. Okay, so since 2023 is not an election year, we were able to return to the normal budget timelines for 2024. So we have our virtual meeting tonight, which is the council presentation of the draft budget. After tonight's presentation, council can decide if a special budget meeting is required. And I believe that we've already established that we will be meeting next Monday. And following that meeting, there is the public presentation of the draft budget on November the 13th. And before the end of the year, and likely closer to the end of November, early December, we will be able to hopefully pass the 2024 budget with a resolution and a bylaw to adopt it. So before we reveal any of these numbers on this slide, I'm sure that I sound like a broken record every year when I say this, but and most of you can likely recite this yourselves, but I'm going to say it again. A balanced municipal budget is a requirement of the Municipal Act. And that is why we still work on a cash basis when determining the taxation levy and the tax rate. So the total expenditures for the year minus the total revenues are what provides us with the amount of dollars that are to be raised by taxation in any given calendar year. So Marion and I attended a finance forum last Thursday, and something that was said by one of the speakers that resonated with me was that having a balanced budget does not mean that everything is okay. So that kind of stuck with me because of how concerning our funding gaps are for the future. And we're all aware of that this is not new information. But in the budget document, if you look at the years beyond 2024, you will see that we've left some projects hanging, or by hanging, I mean unfinanced or unfunded. And what we've done is we've recognized that those projects are on our radar. They were included in our long-term capital plan. They're in our asset management plan. They were in the DC study, but regardless, the sources of funding to keep those projects alive and in the budget, and with the state of the economy that has inflated basically everything, what it's going to come down to for council in the following years is that you're going to have to assess projects by risk and levels of service that you're comfortable in providing, and so that you can determine which projects will outweigh one another and which ones you will prioritize and do first. At the forum, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, they presented that they're working on a new municipal growth framework. And the reason they're doing that is because of the limitations that exist to the current framework. And that is evident, and our town is a prime example, that municipalities are facing difficult times managing growth and meeting demands. And according to FCM, this is a Canada-wide problem. So in June of this year, Canada reached a population of 40 million according to Statistics Canada. And municipal revenues, which is predominantly for us, our tax rates and our water rates, are not growing at the same speed as the population or the economy. So with this new municipal framework, they are hoping that they will enhance the provincial and federal levels of transfers that municipalities receive, and that this will provide a more adequate and guaranteed source of revenue. So while this is not promised, it is in the works. A lot of the demands that we are facing are because of provincial and federal policies that have been put into place. So at least someone is recognizing that those levels of government also need to provide the adequate funding in order for municipalities to be able to carry out those new demands. So the only problem is that this does not help us with our 2024 budget, but I just wanted you to be aware of what we learned last week, and that maybe there's a slight glimmer of hope in our forecast for that, in that respect. So starting with 2024, our estimated expenses are approximately $12.9 million, and our revenues are just over $3 million. So that means that we need to raise almost $9.9 million in taxes through our tax levy and tax rates. And turning to the budget framework, on October 16th, staff presented council with a budget framework report outlining certain items that would be proposed in the draft 2024 budget. So I'm just going to remind everybody of what those items were. The first one was raising the keeping the tax rate increase to not exceed 5%. We've included 3 new positions, that of a recreation program special events coordinator, an operations analyst, and a utilities laborer. We were also given direction to proceed with the RFP process for a new plow truck and a parks and recreation pickup truck. Both of those funded by development charges, by the way. And while the amounts that staff have suggested for the increase in transfers to reserves to address our infrastructure funding gap, we have more needs and wants than we have funds. And when you take into consideration risk management, best practices, and our long-term budget plan, it is evident that an increase in some of those transfers to the reserves was needed in order to fund the future. And while the amounts that staff have suggested are an increase to the tax-supported budget, they really are only a drop in the bucket in comparison to what is actually going to be needed beyond 2024. And council will see in the budget document itself, as I mentioned already, that there are many unfinanced capital projects in more than one service area. And 2 of council's priorities were set at the beginning of the year, and they were to provide responsible financial management through long-term planning. And that is what staff is trying to achieve, and to invest in critical infrastructure and services for the future. So in 2023, we had budgeted to take from the tax stabilization reserve. But due to increased investment income that we have recognized as additional revenue in 2023, it will not be necessary for us to take the funds out of that reserve. And instead, we are budgeting to replenish them using the 2023 estimated surplus, so that those funds can be used to reduce the 2024 tax levy and help build it in case we need it for 2025 as well. The last item added to the framework motion was to remove the costs associated with providing in-town weekend transit in 2024. So we have removed that line. The details surrounding the service were provided by the CAO in a report that was also presented to council on October the 16th. And before you is our year-over-year comparison of estimated revenues with a brief explanation as to the changes reflected. A lot of revenue fluctuations are simply due to changes in transfers to and from reserves and available grants at the time. So while the chart shows an overall increase of 8.6% in order to match expenditures, the actual levy increase is 8.72 and is required to achieve this. And in keeping with the balanced budget, these also represent the expenditures that are being presented in the draft 2024 budget. And more specifically, this budget includes things like increases to insurance premiums, fuel costs, utilities, CPI tied to existing contracts, increases with respect to vehicle and equipment repairs and maintenance and other service areas. And you will notice from the explanation column and further detailed in the budget document that many of the increases in costs can be attributed to growth and the staffing resources needed to build a responsive organizational capacity in order to carry them out. More specifically, in some of the areas you will notice, the second line says operations in transit has an 11.2% increase. That increase is without including transit in the budget. So had that remained, that line or that service area would be an even higher percentage. The IT contract that we have with the County of Dufferin, it was a 3-year phase-in, and we are in year 3 of 3. So that means that we are paying 100% of the county IT contract. They are no longer subsidizing that. We've increased crossing guards. We've also increased costs under the council and committees line, and that is some additional costs that we are going to incur in order to hopefully return to the council chambers, as everybody would like to do. So those costs are all already built in here. So the homeowner tax impact. On a positive note, because the town is still experiencing growth, even though we still don't have phased-in assessment, the town did experience another 4% growth in taxable assessment, which has allowed for a lower tax rate than would have been required had growth not occurred at all. And I know I say that every year as well, but one of these days this growth might stop. And I honestly do not know how other municipalities are keeping up with the economy when they are not experiencing any growth. So we have that to be fortunate for. And as always, staff is recommending that council take advantage of that additional growth while it is available. So we'll just go through the amounts. Here we've got a 9% increase in the tax levy. Now I've rounded all these numbers to whole numbers. So if you're looking back at some of the other spreadsheets, if you just round up, you'll have these numbers. So 9% increase in the tax levy is the equivalent to a 5% increase in the tax rate. And that is because we had 4% growth. This works out to $11 per month on an average home assessment, or $132 annually. And again, this is the town portion only and does not include that of the county or the school boards. So provided here is the example of a random home assessments throughout town and what the adoption of this budget would mean. And I've added to the bottom of this table from other years, I've added the Fieldgate subdivision and included a single family dwelling as well as a townhouse. And you will notice, because MPAC is still using 2016 as the base year, those homes are coming in assessed at the same amount and sometimes even lower to what a home is in Highland Village. So even though those houses out there are selling for over $1 million, some of them we've seen, the assessment's still $473,000. We still do not have any word on when or how the province intends to play catch up with market value assessment. So also included in the budget framework report was the organizational chart. So we've just stuck it in here again for you. And the 3 new positions and who they report to are identified in yellow. This slide sets out how $1 of taxpayers' money is split between the various services that the municipality provides. And other protective services includes bylaw enforcement, crossing guards, and conservation. Public Works includes the cemetery, waste management, and storm sewers. Planning and Development includes the BIA levy and the economic development budget. Recreation and Culture includes the town's share of the CDRC and library, as well as heritage, local cultural grants, Fiddle Park, and town events. General Government and Town Hall includes HR and communications, as well as general administration and the Town Hall. As mentioned in the Budget Framework Report, 35% of our operational budget is expenses that have been submitted by the local boards' budgets. So on to capital projects. The general capital projects for 2024 total $8.4 million. And just for reference, 2023 total was $5.3 million. However, there are some carryover projects that didn't occur in 2023. Connecting Link is one example of that. The town was successful in obtaining the Connecting Link grant for Owen Sound Street. Hold on, I'm ahead of myself. Hang on. First, we're doing some exterior upgrades to the town hall to protect that asset from deterioration. So those costs, along with a new server, are just over $100,000. Then we have our Connecting Link and paving needs and cemetery expansion. The OCIF funding and the Connecting Link are part of the grants that we receive that help pay for those infrastructure costs. And there are several planned purchases of various equipment for operations, parks, and recreation in accordance with the 5-year capital plan and the asset management plan, some DC eligible and some from reserves. The planned workshop expansion in 2023 has been pushed into the 2024 budget along with the generator purchase. And I did actually watch the County Council General Government Services from last week, and the town was successful in getting the $10,000 grant to put towards purchase of 2 emergency road closure trailers. So that is also included in this operations budget. And lastly, almost half of the capital budget has been identified to take place in the service area of recreation, and it is in accordance with the projects identified in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, most of which are DC eligible. One project that was identified in 2023 was the Walters Creek Playground Replacement Project that is being funded from Recreation Reserves. And that project has been moved into 2024 as we have just recently closed the RFP for that project, but the work will not be completed until next year. So this is the funding sources for the general capital budget. And as in prior years, we always try to fund from reserves and development charges and grants and try to stay away from touching the tax base as much as possible. There are a couple of little projects here that do pull from the tax base. The grants, as mentioned before, include the OCIF, the Connecting Link, and gas tax. The donations that are identified here are from Picking in the Park for improvements to the pavilion at Fiddle Park, and as well the Rotary Splash Pad, the Rotary Club for possible commitment to a shade structure at the Rotary Splash Pad at Greenwood Park. Development charges make up just over half of the revenue source for the projects, and they are predominantly coming from the recreation development charge service area. So something staff did this year was separated the reserves pertaining to the tax-supported budget from that of the water and sewer reserves. So as mentioned during the budget discussions, reserves are only transferred and utilized if a project proceeds or if grant funding is successful. And for that reason, the starting numbers of 2024 reserve balances will differ from that had originally been projected as a 2023 ending balance. The tax stabilization reserve is an example of that. We're showing it starting at 514,000, and that includes the 150,000 that we have suggested be put into the reserve in 2023 from the 2023 surplus. So by taking 300,000 out in 2024, it still leaves 214,000 in that reserve for 2025. The general capital reserve takes a big hit this year with the proposed workshop expansion. And that was a project that had previously been identified for 2023, but has been pushed out to 2024. So again, your beginning balances will differ from what we had originally projected in 2023. And for the water and sewer operating budgets, in accordance with the recent water rate study, this slide shows the changes that were adopted and includes the alternative rate structure that changed the increasing block consumptive rates that served to promote water conservation. And staff are working on the bylaw to bring to council in November to formally adopt those rates for the water and wastewater study that was recently done. And for water and sewer capital, one change that has taken place here is that all long-term debt has been moved from the water and sewer capital budget to the water and sewer operating budget. With respect to water capital, the water storage and well 3 are wrapping up and considered substantially complete. So we did not carry those projects forward into 2024. The new capital projects that are associated with water are some changes that are required with well 1, as well as starting the process to develop a new well number 9. And with respect to the sewer capital, we all know that we have the continuation of the waste pollution control plant engineering and design phase that we are still in the middle of. And those projects just identified will be funded from development charges and as well as water and sewer reserves. And so this slide shows the estimated water and sewer reserve summary. So we've pulled this out of the other slide, as I mentioned. And what I wanted to do is show you that for the next 4 years, what the water study had predicted would go into reserves for both water and sewer. So just so that you have some idea of the reserves and the development charges that could be utilized to start the waste pollution control plant project in 2025. And by 2027, when the plant is projected to be open or finished, the debt capacity would open up with those 2 loans that are set to come off in 2026. And we could see ourselves debenturing as late as in late 2026, early 2027. The next slide also shows the combination of revenue sources that will be required to fund the wastewater pollution control plant. And when I say a combination of revenues, I've listed the development charges, long-term debt, reserves, grant revenue, if available, and if we're successful in getting it, as well as front-ending agreements with interested developers. So a combination of all of these revenues, while we don't know yet what that combination will look like, we do know that it will include all of the above that we've identified here. So the annual chart for Infrastructure Ontario is included here, and you can see that generally it's considered practical to ensure that your reserve balances at least equal what your total debt is. And at the end of 2024, the balance is just over $7 million. And the combined reserves of the tax supported budget and the water rate budget are $12.6 million. But however, as we all know, these reserves are being depleted faster than we can replenish them. And it will not be too long before we fall behind in our reserves, and debt will be ahead of us as far as the gap between the two of them. And that's a solemn way to end the presentation, and I didn't realize that till now, but I'm sorry. That is the end, and I will stop sharing my screen and return the meeting back to the mayor.
Right, thanks, Carrie. Questions? Councillor Bernardo.
Sorry. Where in all of this does sidewalks, does it work into where roads and sewers are?
Sidewalks is in the operations budget.
In the operations budget?
Yeah, and it's 60,000, I believe, is the amount that's in there.
Okay.
It's on page 33 of the general operating budget.
It's always a lower amount than the amount of sidewalks we seem to be fixing or need to fix. And that's why I was asking.
I didn't quite make that out.
Sorry, I'm just saying it's always a lower amount than the amount of sidewalks we need to fix. And that's why I was asking.
Okay. I'm assuming Jim will be joining us next Monday and can maybe go through the roads needs study, which I think that number is based on generally, but okay.
Yeah, Jim's on vacation for this week.
Okay. Yeah.
If I can follow up on your comment, your worship, in the roads needs study, is the amount of sidewalks needing to be fixed or replaced as a part of that? And if Jim can answer that part, I would appreciate that answer as well. So when he comes back, please let him know that.
Oh, I mean, I can answer that now. The roads needs study does include that. It includes a schedule of what maintenance should be undertaken and why, based on standards being achieved. And while what may appear to be a sidewalk in need of repair, it may not have reached the schedule under which we would undertake that work in terms of an asset management type of approach. But certainly Jim can explain it more when he's back, and also provide you with any additional reports that will help just overview why we've adjusted or what we've invested with respect to that maintenance schedule.
I would appreciate that, because I don't disagree with anything you're saying. It's just to have that knowledge when you get a lot of complaints gives you some ability to answer back. And not having that knowledge makes it very difficult when someone complains to you and says that they're having an issue with the sidewalk and you don't know where it sits on asset management or replacement or anything else.
Thanks for the comment. We certainly can probably put more information from the roads needs study and extract it and bullet that in terms of what the schedules will look like. Similarly, we do that with lane paving and other work, so that if somebody asks, we can then point them to those pages and say, this is where your street or lane falls within the schedule.
Carrie?
And I do know that they walk the sidewalks every spring.
Mhm.
So even though they may be identified in the roads needs study, they are still, the condition of them is still verified every spring before they decide which ones would take priority over another.
I've seen them out quite a bit this fall as well. I think maybe doing other things that were locating sewer lines, I think too, but I mean, they're certainly out, to taking stock of what's there and what needs to be repaired. So, but to Denise's point, I think that maybe would be helpful, because You're right, Councilor Bernardo. I mean, I get those sorts of inquiries too. You know, when is my sidewalk, going to get repaired? So if there was something that we could point ratepayers to in terms of a schedule or something like that, that might be helpful. Anything else for Carrie? No? Everybody's going to wait till next Monday? Carrie, I mean, if there are sort of general questions, are you okay? You know, would you like to receive some of those by email between now and next Monday? Like if it's just questions about clarifying certain line items or something like that, rather than spending a lot of time just going through general questions next week?
I would, yes, that would be very beneficial if I had them in advance. And like you say, maybe some of them could be answered ahead of time that are just identifying where something is within the document.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be great.
Denise?
Thanks, Mayor Mills. Just in terms of process, if you do send a question to the treasurer, could you please copy all of your council colleagues so that we can actually create a document that may be forming some kind of Q&A later as well?
Good point. Okay, if there is nothing else at this point, then can I have a motion to receive the draft 2024 budget presentation? By Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? It's carried. Okay. All right, council inquiries. Nothing. I don't believe it. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our regular report. So the first report is just our Q3 financial report from Carrie. So if you want to go through that.
Thank you. So this is the regular report for the period of up to and including September 30th. And there isn't really anything unusual to report. The only thing is the last appendix, the projects awarded for July to September. You find it. I just wanted to point out that we did award the hot mix asphalt resurfacing, which was provided by a motion of council in a report that Jim had presented. We also awarded the winter sand and the sidewalk replacements, as well as boulevard trees during the last quarter.
Okay.
And other than that, unless there's any questions, I don't have anything unusual to report for that third quarter.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo.
Did we award the salt, and did we have any issues getting salt, road salt?
I don't believe that we go to RFP for salt. There's only one company that provides it. We just do winter sand.
Okay, it's just that I'm gathering it's coming from Sarnia, and the salt is provided by whatever company it is up that way. But they had a huge strike this year. And that's why I was asking the question, wondering if there were issues.
Not that I'm aware of, but that would be a question for Jim as well.
Okay.
Oh, actually, sorry, I have a note here from Marion. No issues with salt. It's already been delivered.
Excellent.
All right. Anything else for Carrie on this report? Okay. Can I have a motion then to receive the report and to authorize the treasurer to transfer to and from reserves as necessary at year end to close out finished projects and set aside unspent funds collected from taxation to complete the unfinished projects from this year and next year? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. All right, number 2 is the DEI committee resolution that we're going to move to the November 13th meeting. So that takes us to item number 3 on the agenda, which is a nomination for the Community Excellence Award. I have a mover and a seconder for that motion. By Councillor Sample, second by Councillor Wagner. Does anybody want to speak to that one before we go ahead? We'll invite this community member to a future meeting to formally accept the award. So we can maybe save comments for that meeting. Okay, all in favor? It's carried. All right, next item is notice of motion moved by Councillor Guichardi at the last meeting. Motion reads as follows: whereas a growing sector of Shelburne's population is ever dependent on the Shepherd's Covered Food Bank, aka the Shelburne Food Bank, as a backstop to food insecurity, and whereas the Shepherd's Covered Food Bank provides a vital service to community members in need of assistance, and whereas the Shepherd's Covered Food Bank would moving forward benefit from a stable funding model as opposed to the traditional grant application process. Therefore, be it resolved, the council directs staff to explore how Shepherd's Covered Food Bank can be incorporated into the town's budget as a yearly line item prior to the grant application process for 2025. The staff report should include any advantages or concerns in regard to implementing the above mentioned and recommend a potential dollar amount for this line item. Council requests the staff report to be back on this matter no later than April 2024. First of all, is there a seconder for that motion? I'll go ahead and second it just to get it on the table for discussion. Councillor Guichardi, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I do, in that it seems to be a little redundant, seeing as how we know Food Bank is one of the major grant recipients every year. And will they have to go through the process where they come cap in hand, essentially looking for money. I mean, we're not necessarily spending any more money by transferring it to a line item. We're just moving those funds from the grant budget into a line item budget. It's good for them because it frees them up some time to look for other resources for financial backing. If they know for the next 2 or 3 years that they're going to be receiving X from the town and can count on that, that frees them up to either approach other communities or private donations, whereas their time would be better spent doing that than coming to council on a yearly basis. And in terms of it being good for the town, we know that line item is set for the next few years, however long we want to extend that line item for. And at this time, it's just essentially an inquiry process. It's not necessarily something that will we'll be implementing until we take a good hard look at what the report data comes back as. So that's kind of the essence of the motion. Yeah, I'll take any other questions.
Okay. Discussion. Councillor Bernardo.
I won't be supporting this motion. Being a member of the grant committee, we have not gotten, even at the grant committee level, the information we need to make proper decisions. I can't see it going through staff and being a part of our line budget because it's very difficult to get the proper information required. And to my mind right now, we're having staff do enough work for us on other things that we do require without going down this path. Until there's a different method that they use to put forward the information that is required to make proper decisions by any level of staff, never mind just us as committee members, I just in no way can support this motion. I don't want to waste staff time going down a path that doesn't need to, that they don't need at this point to go down. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Deputy Mayor Hall?
So again, I appreciate Councillor Gucciardi's efforts with the motion. However, with that being said, I will also not be supporting this because in my opinion, it is most pertinent for council to continue to review the needs on a yearly basis. And the burden goes beyond just that of our municipality. I feel that it is pertinent to look at all options, whether that be joining forces within the county or even looking broader, such as the Ontario Association of Food Banks. So creating this just as a budget line, unfortunately, does not give this the attention that it needs, in my opinion.
Okay. Councillor Fegan.
I stand with my colleagues who just basically said that they're not going to support this. I can't support this either. The biggest issue that I have is they're not following proper accounting practices. We cannot see proper budgeting processes. The fact that they're not even a registered charity at this point is a concern to me. Most food banks themselves partner up with other food banks, including provincial food banks, in order to make themselves a larger organization to get more funding through other avenues. If they were a registered charity as well, there would be more companies that would be more willing to support them directly. As it stands, not being a registered charity, companies who support them cannot get tax write-offs. Now, a lot of organizations who are going to donate to them aren't donating for the tax write-offs. However, that could be an incentive that could increase their bottom line. Unfortunately, I also can't support this.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I'll add my, oh, sorry, Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thanks so much. This one's tricky just because obviously we are seeing a higher demand or need for the food banks in general, including those in our community. So of course, that side of me wants to support our local food bank and make sure that they have the funds that they need to help our community. The other side of me obviously has to think with regards to protecting and using tax dollars in a reasonable manner. And, as to Kyle's point, it is a little hard to spend public dollars when an organization isn't at the level of accreditation that some other organizations are. We did hear, of course, from the food bank themselves that said if they were to take those steps, there's a lot more red tape involved with regards to how they can receive donations and food and things of that nature. And that's why they've somewhat shied away from doing that, because they have a little more freedom right now with regards to accepting donations. And so I understand that. But I also have to look, again, like I said, with regards to spending tax dollars and public dollars responsibly. It's so, yeah, it is really difficult to make this an actual line item, specifically too as well, because with the grant funding process, we ask for numbers, and within those numbers, they do fluctuate. So, if they're asking for a specific amount of money, and we can say, okay, can we see the numbers of the people within our community that are utilizing the food bank? We have in the past taken that into consideration when we provide a number. So a percentage of or whatnot of the number that they're asking for, with correlation to the number of community members that are currently using it within our town, with, of course, the recommendations to reach out to the other municipalities around us who have members using the food bank, so that they could potentially chip in as well. So the only reason I do like them coming, and I know that it does take time away from them, unfortunately, with other areas that they deal with, but it allows us as council to continue to monitor the numbers so that we know if it's going up, if it's going down, and you know, those who are those in our community that are requiring this. And then, you know, within that aspect, we can somewhat adjust the amount that we're giving. So again, my only concern is if we give a specific number on a budget line, that number may not change, and they may actually require more the next year within the grant funding, which we would then, you know because the numbers are up, and we can adjust it at that level. But without, you know, them coming to us and saying, you know, these are the numbers in town that are being used, we might not know that the numbers are indeed going up, and then they wouldn't actually be receiving enough funding at that point. So I do appreciate them coming and giving us those numbers so that we can monitor those stats and you know, have a history so that we know what we're looking at and where we're moving to within the town and its utilization. So I do really appreciate, Len, your you know, go-to for this, and you're advocating for them. And I just don't want you to feel like we're all saying no, and you know, it's just these are reasons why. But yeah, thank you very much.
I seconded the motion to have this discussion because I think it's an important one to have. That said, I won't be supporting the motion either. But that being said, Councillor Guicciardi, I do want to thank you for bringing the motion forward, because I do think it is an important discussion that we have. And the last thing I want to see come out of this is a narrative that Shelburne Council does not support the food bank, because quite frankly, you know, there couldn't be anything further from the truth. And I think one need only look back at the last number of years and the annual grant contributions that have been made by council. So it's not a question of whether or not this council supports the food bank. That's, you know, an unequivocal and emphatic yes. It's just how we do that. And in terms of process, much like what Councillor Wagner said, you know, we are ultimately the fiduciaries and trustees of public dollars that we collect through tax levies. And we have a responsibility to ensure that we spend that money as responsibly as possible. There are a number of variables, I think, that are attached to the food bank budgets each year, which make it difficult to set a line item, as has been mentioned. And we just heard from our treasurer that, you know, the next few years are going to be difficult enough as it is budgeting for sort of our core services. And since this isn't one of our core services, I'm hesitant to include that as a regular line item in our budget. The extra piece that I'll throw in just in closing is that my fear is that in providing that sort of annualized funding by way of regular budgeted money, I think that may act as a bit of a disincentive for our food bank to look at potential synergies with other groups. I do still think there is you know, a good possibility to, you know, combine efforts in one form or another on a regional basis within the county. And as long as we're still, you know, sort of creating those silos, I think that probably is going to act as a disincentive to that sort of partnership down the road. I know that's a slow process, but it's one that I still think has some significant value, and I still would like to pursue that. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting it. But again, Councillor Guicciardi, I certainly commend you for bringing it forward. And again, the last thing I want is to hear anybody saying that this council or you know, any previous council for that matter is not supportive of the food bank, because that just simply is not factual. Any other thoughts, Councillor Guicciardi? I don't know if you want to provide any parting comments.
No, everybody's input is welcome and appreciated, and I will withdraw the motion. Withdraw the
Okay, I mean, that's up to you. We can
Well, I mean, it's the, you know, if there's no support for it, then we'll have to look at other, you know, that's okay. Good.
Okay.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so, okay, we'll withdraw that motion then. And then that takes us to the second notice of motion from the last meeting, which was moved by Councilor Bernardo. Be it resolved, the council asks MTO to put in a slower speed limit on Highway 8910 between the Mulmer-Melancthon town line and the current 50 km/h zone entering the town of Shelburne, slowing traffic down from 80 km/h before it comes to the 50 km/h. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councilor Fegan. Okay, thank you. Councilor Bernardo, do you want to speak to that?
It's pretty difficult to, when you're running down a 4-lane highway at 80 km/h to suddenly hit this 50 km/h zone and automatically slow down to 50 kilometers. Nobody does it, basically. You see them coming in and they're coming right up to the lights at 80 km/h. They need some time to slow down. Any other municipality where you come in towards a municipality, you have an area where you slow down from the speed of regular highway speed to the local municipal town speed. And unfortunately, and it was like that before the development happened on the east side of town, and for some strange reason, I have no understanding why, when we moved the 50 kilometers out towards the east side, there was no provision for a slowdown from the 80 to the 50. So all we're doing is requesting that same slowdown that we had at one point in time coming into our municipality from the MTO. In my mind, it should have happened automatically when the boundaries were moved out, and it wasn't something that did. So I mean, 124, you go from 80 to a 60, you know, coming through town. It's a slowdown right there before you come into the town. There's nothing. You're going, if you're lucky, at 80 kilometers. Most people are driving at 90, maybe even a little faster than that, and suddenly here's this 50. Do you think they're slowing down? Not a chance. So before some accident happens or something else happens, or somebody gets hit crossing a road somewhere along that area, there needs to be a slowdown. And that's all we're requesting of the MTO. Slow it down, allow traffic to have some time to slow down from their 90 or 80 or whatever they're doing to a proper at least 50 or 60 coming into the town itself.
Okay. I know our CAO has had some experience dealing with MTO with these sorts of requests. Do you have any thoughts, Denise?
Sure, through you, Mayor Mills. So part of our discussion when we're looking at the connecting link and reducing that to 40, which we still haven't formally done, and we're going to be following up with that with the traffic calming report. So in November, we'll be getting that formally endorsed so that we can, through bylaw, advise the MTO that we have council's formal approval again to reduce the connecting link within the jurisdiction of the town of Shelburne down to 40. So as the development was being built and those lights were going in, we did have a conversation and sort of asked some philosophical questions where we actually suggested as staff to slow the speed down, actually starting at Primrose, where that section coming before Shelburne would be not 80, but maybe 70. And then at the Mulmer-Melancthon town line, it would probably drop to 60, etc. Obviously, you know, the answer was no, but we did explore at least in terms of conversation, and we can resurrect that conversation. It would be important, though, I think, with respect to jurisdiction, that that area is not within the boundary of the town of Shelburne. That if the support of the budding communities that were in that part of the MTO corridor was in their municipality, that additional support would be helpful. And we would have to just resurrect that conversation in terms of speed. I know Carrie mentioned the seminar that she attended, so I'm going to do the same thing with respect to traffic calming and another presentation that was recently done at Grey Highlands, where a local organization on one slide created a very succinct comparator that shows the difference in philosophies. So the old way of designing roads was predominantly to move traffic at the fastest and most efficient means necessary. And that wasn't a holistic approach to management of pedestrians and safe communities. So we probably here have a philosophical discussion to have with the MTO, who is in the industry of moving traffic. And when it butts and comes into an urban setting where pedestrians and other users are at risk for potential safety issues, we have to work through that process with them. So we certainly can try our best to move this forward. I just wanted to give you some reference, and I think we will be reaching out to the abutting municipalities for their support as well.
So if I can follow up on our CEO's comments, if I can add to our motion that this motion be forwarded to the townships of Melancthon, Mulmer, and Ameren for their support, and that we forwarded it on to our MPP as well, and ask for her assistance in this as well. I think that this would at least put some of the discussion in their municipalities along with what we're proposing and asking for their support, and maybe by forwarding it on to our MPP, we might get some additional help at MTO. I know they're quite good at saying no, very hard at saying yes, but maybe with some support from an upper level government, that might help as well. Just some thoughts.
I'm just wondering too, Councillor Bernardo, based on Denise's comments in terms of reaching out to the other 4 rural municipalities, if it might be better to phrase the motion rather than council requesting directly to MTO, that we direct staff to engage with the other 4 municipal partners and then to make that request to MTO.
Yeah, I'm open to that. I have no issues with that if my seconder is open to that as well.
Councillor Fegan, are you okay with that? Okay. Denise, are you okay with that? So, I mean, the notion is it will direct staff to sort of have those discussions with our neighboring municipalities, and then, you know, hopefully get everybody on board and make a unified pitch to MTO. Okay. Councillor Sample, did I see your hand up earlier? And then, sorry, Councillor Fegan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that stretch, yeah, I understand that it's busy in that, but there is a sign that goes out a ways that says speed limit changing to 50, so you need to be aware of that. I'm not sure if changing the speed limit, like they're not going to go all the way back to Primrose like they said, because that's a long distance with not very much housing and stuff going on, public access happening in that area. So I drive that section of the road every day, every morning, every afternoon coming in. I do see a change in the traffic flow in that area, that it is at the 50 mark where it says it's going down. People are slowing down in that area. It may be more apparent that like we've seen in the past, and we've been known for it, is we have our traffic calming areas with our friendly neighborhood OPPs that come in and do some radar checks in the area. Maybe there needs to be some questions back to them too. But from what I've seen in the last probably few months now, it's been calming coming down through that area. And I don't know if it's because of the presence of OPP on Highway 10 and everything, that things are changed the last little while, but I've noticed a big change in traffic flow between 89, Highway 10, 124, and Highway 10 going north, especially. So I've seen a big difference in it. I come in that way, like I said, every day, and I know when I see the sign says 50, I know that potentially they could be there, so I'm dropping my speed. And I think that's and I'm seeing a lot of them doing that. Even in the 50 zone, when you're coming through town, there's still the odd people that are coming in doing 70. I'm doing 50 and they're flying by me. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things. But until you get that, I think the OPP presence in that area, I think just putting a sign up of changing it to 70 is not going to, because that 50 sign's a way out there too. So to warn people, that's just my opinion. If something goes back to the OPP to request that, I'd see that might be better, but
I'll let Councillor Bernardo respond to that, and then I'll go to Councillor Fegan.
I come in that way as well. Unfortunately, there are people who do slow down, but there are quite a number who don't slow down, and it's no different than the right turn lane when you're coming down to Greenwood Street. That sign is quite a distance out. There's enough markings on the pavement saying that that's a right-hand turn lane. Yet there are people that go straight through there and wait to the very lights almost before they suddenly go into the left lane because they have to go straight. So there are people, it doesn't matter what the signage is, either their tunnel vision or whatever, they don't seem to see them and they continue on. So while I don't disagree with you, I do agree with you. Primrose maybe is a little bit far for me as a stretch. That's why I selected the Melanchthon town line as being the area I thought the slowdown should be. And at least it gives, with the 70 in there, it gives also the OPP an opportunity, if there are those that want to go through at higher speeds, the opportunity to give them a lesson in reading signage. So that's the reason the suggestion was the Melanchthon town line to the 50 zone. And I'll leave it to Councillor Fegan now at this point. I've said, I think, everything I want to say.
Okay, Councillor Fegan.
I'm also aware of an organization, a not-for-profit organization called Community Safety Partners, and I know that one of their mandates is road safety. It might not be a bad idea to have staff reach out to them as well to see if we can get their input, if there's any recommendations they can make as well. And Denise, I do have contacts that I can certainly share with you to have you reach out and talk with them, see if they have any input that they might advise. I'm not exactly sure 100% what their mandate is, but if they can maybe give us some advice on ways to deal with this, might not be another bad avenue to take a look at as well.
Okay, Councillor Guichardi.
And I'm just wondering what jurisdiction the town has in terms of putting how far out we can put, your speed is, the radar signage. I'm not sure if that's an interim stopgap that we could, while we're waiting on, higher ups in the MTO.
So I can
Please.
clarify that within the MTO's jurisdiction, no one else other than the MTO has any authority to install signage, speed notifications, anything on their jurisdictional corridor. So for example, even if we were to move from a traffic calming perspective with speed cameras, they may not be placed on the connecting link without the MTO's approval. So we cannot place anything on that property that is not within the jurisdiction of the town of Shelburne.
So all roads lead back to the MTO. Okay.
Just one more point. Sorry. So I think it's the third line coming into town where the storage unit place is.
Yeah.
That one drops from 80 down to 50 right away. And I know a lot of traffic is stopped in that area down at the 50 mark because the OPP have been sitting in at the storage unit, giving a lot of tickets out. So that changes a lot there too, right? So same thing. So
it's actually 40, Dan, on Victoria.
Sorry, 40.
And Victoria is within is the town of Shelburne control.
And that's what I'm saying, but I'm just saying it's going from an 80 to a 42.
So
right?
that's county to town. Yes, you're correct. That is also a significant adjustment. But
making a light of that one too. So that's all.
Yeah, but to your point, Councillor Sample, I mean that's one that's been patrolled heavily for quite a long time, and I think it's well known that it's a spot where odds of seeing a cruiser in the storage yard for locals who travel that road regularly, it's well known. So okay, don't see anybody else on this. So is everybody clear on the motion then? So it's changed slightly from the actual verbiage that was in the agenda. So we're going to direct staff to work with neighboring municipalities and then approach MTO from there. So I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. All right, any notices of motion for this evening? No. Okay, on to communications. Is there anything in there that anybody wants to deal with specifically? Councillor Gashardi and then Councillor Bernardo.
Yeah, number 10 from the Corporation of the Town of
Archipelago.
Thank you. Should we be sending a letter of support to Aurora for their gender-based and intimate partner violence epidemic?
Okay. Yep. Is there a seconder to support that? Councillor Bernardo. Right. All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Just the one, Councillor Gashardi?
Yeah, that's the only one that I'm seeing as how it's we're going to be raising a flag in support. It makes sense.
Absolutely. Councillor Bernardo.
I have two. Number 11, the correspondence from Watson Associates. I wouldn't mind if staff would give us some input as to how that will affect in the future. I wouldn't mind seeing a staff report coming back. That's on Bill 123. And number 12, the correspondence from Upper Grand. I'm kind of concerned about the realignment with students coming out of Primrose into Centennial Highlands. We have students potentially coming from Fieldgate. Are we going to now overcrowd Centennial Highlands with the amount of students changing over with the boundary changes? We're not getting a real lot of information from Upper Grand at this point. And even though they were at a council meeting not that long ago, this is kind of out of the blue from them because they mentioned nothing at that point in time. So is it possible we can get either more information from them as to what his plans are and how it's going to affect our Fieldgate subdivision, the amount of students coming in from that area, and whether we're looking at potential 20 portables sitting behind Centennial Highlands, or what the heck is their plans for the future?
So would you like an inquiry made to the board specifically on the potential impact at Centennial Highlands?
Yes.
Okay. Staff, can we ask that of board representatives? Denise?
Certainly we can. I did provide, due to Councillor Regner's question, all of the links with respect to this process, and that the board has asked that any questions be directed to the email that they sent, and that they will be then compiling all of those questions, because this is simply being proposed, and there's a community public open house or type of engagement session. I think it's on November 5th at the school, which is for that dialogue for the affected families and parents. And obviously the school, based on the summary, where there is any capacity, would be Centennial. It would not be the other two. And those are certainly questions that can be asked of them.
I'm not sure. I have no children in the school system at this point in time, whether myself showing up even as a counselor. This is more of a question for a session for the parents and those affected by the boundary potential changes at that meeting at that night. I'm thinking more as a town, we should be inquiring on our, just for ourselves, because I'm more concerned about how it affects the Fieldgate subdivision, students potential coming out of there, and how much occupation they're going to, how they're calculating the occupation of Centennial Highlands. So I'm just not sure that showing up at that meeting at Primrose Gym, how I'd be viewed even.
So just to follow up, staff will remit the question on behalf of council and your discussion tonight. And sorry, if I may be confused. Oh, sorry, that's the dog. I apologize. I didn't mean to say that you as counselors should go to the meeting, but I think that it would be premature to have them provide any response to the strategy until they have those inputs and have formulated the next steps in terms of their directions. So I think when they can outline where they're going to be redirecting the students, what that capacity impact would be, they do have an accommodation plan, they'd be better prepared to then outline, is there physical impacts to the school property? Is there other redistribution impacts within the existing elementary schools within Shelburne? And all of those things they'll have to evaluate in terms of this recommended direction that they're undertaking. So I think it's premature to have them back. You may be having them back. This is supposed to become effective for the 24-25 school year.
So if I can follow up on that, is it potential to have them back at our December meeting? After
I would say no. I think that's still way too early with respect to where we can ask them, but whether or not they are able to is certainly, something they'll respond to.
So at what point would you suggest we have them come back to us in January?
I would suggest once they have a formalized recommendation coming out of their consultative process, that you have that presented to you, or if it's presented through a remission, that if you have further questions as it affects the town of Shelburne, that then they be asked to come back. That might be spring 2024. Again, this is to be effective the 24-25 school year. And then you'll know exactly what the student population, when assumption is taken from all the homes in Fieldgate, will look like. Whether there's any outward migration and not as many families are actually living in those homes, we don't know. But until those homes are assumed, there's really no data to determine how many new students are going to be in our school population.
So at this stage, would it be fair to sort of note the concern that Councillor Bernardo was raised and ask the board to sort of keep this council apprised of developments, but before they make a formal recommendation to the board?
Certainly you can ask that.
Councillor Wagner?
Yes, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I think Denise kind of covered it with kind of my question. I think, with regards to Walter and his question, I kind of agree. Like, if they have sort of an initial idea of the boundaries that they're going to propose, then they may also have an initial number of the current students that are within that boundary change that they could hopefully report back to us, maybe before they do a whole bunch more consultation as to who will be attending, the school as set, right? So, I mean, that would be my thought, is that if they already know sort of the boundary that they're going to propose, then they should know the number of students that currently reside in that boundary, which will then be transferring over to Centennial. So that would just be the initial question, I guess, that I would sort of put forward to ask if they could just provide us maybe with that information before they go through the rest of their consultation. I don't know, but yeah, that's just my thought. Thank you.
And I have one further question. What's going to happen to the French immersion part of Centennial Highlands? Is that going to be moved somewhere else? Is that going to continue in Centennial Highlands? Because there's already a portion of Centennial Highlands used up as French immersion.
I think that would probably be answered a little bit more after the consultation period, though, because then they'll have a better idea of, with the parents and their replies, and then, even maybe more with the Emeralds Crossing and or whatever, would be going into that, filtering into that school. They'll have to know, okay, if we're overcapacitated now and need to look at where the French immersion would go. But I do think they should have some initial numbers as to the boundary and the current students that are in that boundary and, expected to switch over to Centennial.
I think at this stage, all we can do is sort of note the concern and then see what we get back in terms of a response.
And I should just clarify, I've assumed that the capacity would go to Centennial. That may not be what their plan is.
true.
Deputy Mayor Hall and then Councillor Gushardi.
Again, without going into this in even more detail, if you've done the research, you know that the school board is looking at 3 different options. So until they determine what option they're actually pursuing, a lot of these questions are unanswerable. So I think it's pertinent for us to understand what they come out of from their public inquiries and moving forward, and then we can get a clear picture of what the impacts are going to be.
Councillor Gushardi.
Yes, just want to thank Deputy Mayor Hall for stealing my response. It's all good.
All right. Okay. Anything else on communications? I just wanted to highlight number 2 and just thank staff for putting that together. I think it's a good way of both staff and council to track the inquiries and the directions that we've given to staff. Helps us sort of keep track of what our asks have been and track the progress on those, and also, you know, it's a good way of seeing, you know, how much capacity our staff has when we add things to their plate that maybe hadn't initially been part of the vision. But anyways, always good information to have. So with that, can I get a motion just to receive the items listed under communications for information? Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Gushardi. All in favor? It's carried. All right. And a motion for confirming bylaw. Deputy Mayor Hall, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Gushardi. All in favor? Carried. All right. Stay warm, everyone.
Not like you.
See you on Monday.